has come back.
Talk about a terrible Springtrap impression. All right, what's our first upgrade? So the first upgrade we've got is Taskmaster. It has a cooldown of 8 and it's active for 5 seconds. It's a free perk you get right from the start, so it's available for beginners and all players alike, whether it be for veterans, returning players, and beginner players. The perk puts a marker above all incomplete objectives on the map for 5 seconds, and with the cooldown being 8, it's basically a 3-second cooldown in between activations, and that's it. It doesn't have a precursor or a preset condition they need to fulfill. It doesn't have a long cooldown. It's always guaranteed to work, except on one map, in my personal experience, that being hide and seek. But other than that, it's an amazing perk for teaching beginners on the set spawns of objectives, and it's amazing for returning players who are unfamiliar with the new map's objective spots. It doesn't do anything for veterans. It doesn't do anything for you in chase. It does, however, allow you to rush the objectives, so the monster would have less time to set up or rush down and kill survivors because everyone already knows where the objectives are. But perk that provides guaranteed information except on one map, in my personal experience, I'd put this perk in solid B. So the next perk we've got is Energy Burst. Energy Burst is a perk that costs 315 coins, which is the price for all perks that exist so far. And what it does is that it gives you a 5-second speed boost of 20%, which turns you from a 23 sprint speed to 27.6. And after that is over, you then suffer a 30% speed penalty to both walking and sprinting, which means instead of going from 23, you go to 16.1, which is even slower than being bone broken and running. So really slow. The perk is really good against Inkfill and Vapor because they're one of the slower monsters in the entire game. However, any monster with decent sprint speed stats, basically any monster sprinting at the speed of a survivor, if not a little slower or even a little faster, like Jeff, PCX, EXE, Baldi, surprisingly, Aooni, just any monster that isn't egregiously slow and even has a slight bit of mobility, can easily outpace these monsters, or not outpace these monsters, but can easily catch back up with the survivor while they're in the slowdown period. So in my opinion, this perk isn't very good. It's not bad, but it's not very good either. It's kind of, well, in between. It's an okay perk by itself at the very least. If the perk is paired with something else, like Super Slider for example, then the perk is really good and surprisingly decent. But for itself, and by itself, as a getaway tool or as a chase breaker, it's not very good or consistent in terms of ending chases, and there are better options. So ultimately, I would put this perk in somewhere like B. I'd put it in C, but the perk isn't that bad, so we put it in B. And the next perk we got is, oh boy, 6th Sense. Okay, so this perk is like a mini Stefano, but worse. So what the perk does is that it emits an AoE effect that highlights any nearby monsters for a few seconds. The perk has a visible effect showing when the perk's in use. The cooldown is not that long, but it could be shorter. And the reason why this perk is worse than having a Stefano, and why if you want to have this perk but better, just bring a Stefano, is because one, this perk radius is not that much better than Stefano's, and B, after using the perk, you're not able to run for a couple seconds, like 3 to 4 seconds. So if you use this perk while the killer is pretty close to you, you basically just die for free. Because again, if you activate this perk while near the killer, you can't run, because for some reason the perk doesn't let you run for a couple seconds after proccing it. So it's really strange. So again, using this perk near a killer is basically instant death, and the radius of it is not enough to justify that hefty penalty. On top of the fact, it just feels like a waste, and on top of the fact that you're the only one who gets this information. Now, this isn't a video going over what I would do to change the perks in this game, but just a suggestion for this one perk in particular: make it so that either you remove the penalty that you can't walk or that you can't run after using it, increase the range by a tiny bit, or allow your teammates to see the information you get from this perk as well. So it can be one of the first few perks that are in like a support type of niche category. But anyways, I'm rambling. Point is, this perk is not very good. If you want a good version of this that doesn't take away one of your perk slots or upgrade slots, I keep calling them perks. I'm so sorry, I'm DBD brain rot. Bring Stefano. He's just better than this perk. Ever will be. And for that, 6th Sense will have to go in D tier. Yeesh. Now, the next lovely perk we've got to rank is Living Beacon. Living Beacon is a passive ability that highlights the user upon them taking damage. Upon the user taking damage from the monster, they will be highlighted with a white outline to every other living survivor, on top of making it a decently loud and audible like clock chime or some type of chime. It's the first support perk we have in the game, and kind of the only support perk we have in the game, unless you want to consider another support perk. That whatever, we'll talk about that when the time comes. But the point of this perk is just to tell people where the monster is. For whatever reason they would want to know that. That's the point of this perk. Caveat is that this perk needs you to take damage, which is what you don't want to do. It doesn't help you in chase, it doesn't help you survive, it doesn't give you information that you can use for yourself. It's a completely selfless perk, which isn't a bad design, and it's not a bad thing, because I'm going to tell you there's another selfless perk down the line that's really good. But for what this perk provides, for what it's asking for you, which is to take damage, it's not worth it. So yeah, no, it's not a good perk. It's when you do get hit and reveal yourself to your teammates to show where the monster is, it's very brief. I feel like it could be a lot longer, or maybe highlight the monster as well, like where the monster is relative to you. But other than that, the perk just, like, the best case scenario for this perk, in my opinion, is that it reveals when you're getting hit and someone with a gauntlet or a flashbang can run over and support you. But considering support playstyles are not a common thing in this game at all, because there's so little tools for support playstyles, that's rarely ever going to happen. So yeah, this perk is not very good. It's not useless, but pointless, if I had to say. It goes in C. Now, the next perk to cover is Break Free. It's a passive upgrade that gives you a 2-second speed boost upon entering the broken bone state when brought to 20 HP. The 2-second speed boost it gives you when you're bone broken is not bad. It's not a bad speed boost. It's pretty, in my anecdotal experience, it's pretty similar of that of the other speed boost perk, but it doesn't give you that drawback. However, despite being given a 2-second speed boost when being bone broken, majority of the time it's not enough to end chase or to lose the monster and heal up with a medkit or using the map, because majority of the time the monster is going to have some type of mobility tool to catch up with you, or they have enough stamina to keep up the pace with you, because again, you're not moving that fast. And if not that, there are monsters in the game that just don't have to deal with bone break in general. Like, for example, Jeff the Killer doesn't have to deal with bone breaking because he has to hit you 4 times and none of them get you below 20 HP, unless you do like a very specific thing where you let yourself get hit while he's crouched and then get hit by a regular attack. But that's, you have to go out of your way for that to happen. If it's Uncle Samsonite, you can't get, bone broken by him because he 2-taps you. Same thing with Vapor, unless you get hit by his spider things. Point is, you're not going to get bone broken against every monster in the game. And even if you do, it's not a guaranteed escape. And for such a win or lose perk, I wouldn't recommend it. However, it's not terrible because it does have some niche uses and nice flexibility and usage with other perks in the game. But by itself, I'd put it in C. Now, the next perk we have to talk about is Double Down. It's a passive upgrade, and all it does is just makes it so that any items you consume, there's a random chance that you'll be given it back. Now, I was very skeptical about this perk when I first heard about it, because typically I'm not one to be in favor of perks that require gambling. The potential of this perk, when it does work, is pretty strong. You can use this perk to recycle items you use, like medkits and flashbangs, to either support your teammate or help yourself. So let's say, you're injured and the killer is nowhere to be seen. You heal yourself, and with this perk, you get to hold on to that same medkit and potentially give it to another teammate who's bone broken, but also lost the killer, And then the best case, or the best usage of this perk, in my opinion, is for flashbangs. You buy yourself a flashbang from the shop, because you're never going to find them in the map, because they're super rare. And you can basically have a flashbang that you can recycle and spam back to back if you get lucky enough. Because I have heard and I have seen people get lucky enough and be able to get like 3 flashbang uses out of this single perk. So this perk has the potential to be really, really good. Like A, maybe S tier. Probably A is like a safer place to put it. But that's if the perk worked. But because the perk is chance based and it isn't guaranteed to work, it also has the fact that it could just be a wasted perk slot. So for the reasons listed, I'm going to put this perk in B tier. Yes, I am saying it's better than the perks in C tier, even though it's a gimmicky perk. I believe that even though it's a gimmicky perk, it still has a better effect when it works than those in C and below. So that's where I'm putting this bad boy. Now, the next perk we're going to talk about is Cloaked. Oh boy, this one I might get flamed for. Cloaked is an active survivor upgrade that turns you invisible for 6 seconds upon use, but disables your ability to sprint. Now, there are some key details that people don't mention about Cloak, nor does Cloak ever tell you, and it's that 1, you can hear when someone goes into Cloak because there's a very distinct audio cue. 2, you can see when someone goes into Cloak because you see like the wind particles fly off of the person's avatar as they go into Cloak, so you can hear it, you can see it. And 3, you can still hear the person's footsteps, or you can still hear the cloaked person's footsteps as they walk. So there are some caveats to this perk. You can't run, you still make noise, and you can tell when someone uses this perk and have the general area of where they are from when they use this perk because of the little wind particles that fly off of you. However, if you use this behind a wall, if you crouch while you're cloaked, you won't make any noise. You'll make it harder for the killer to guess where you are. And if you choose to stand still, you get to regen all your stamina back, and then when you do reappear, you have all your stamina back to start running again. However, there are some killers who in this game can counter the ever-loving hell out of this perk, and I know one of them because I mained them, Jeff the Killer. He counters the ever-loving hell out of this perk because of his, I guess you could say, killer instinct, where if he's crouched, he can see your heartbeat, and when he's in maniacal haste, he can see your heartbeat as well. So Jeff counters this. Springtrap counters this because his ventilation error will still give you away. Vita Mimic can counter you because of the bleed effect can still give you away. Basically, any killer who can apply an effect that shows up on your model or avatar. However, this perk can counter most tools of getting found because while you are cloaked, you can prevent yourself from being highlighted through killer perks like EXE's Periodic Sniff. It'd work against Fogborn when he goes invisible. It'd work against MX when he kills someone and gets that brief reveal on everybody. However, you have to cloak before you get highlighted, otherwise it won't work. And even then, there are certain killers in this game who hard counter cloaked, like Forest King, because Lurking Facade will still go to the person who's cloaked, because Lurking Facade isn't fooled by the cloaked person. Same with Vapor and his Spider Skulls. So let's see here. There's a handful of killers who hard counter this perk, and even when you do manage to successfully use this perk the best way that you can, out of line of sight, have some distance on the killer, it doesn't get you all too far from the killer, because if you're trying to walk away from the point that you initially disappeared, they'll hear that. And if you try to crouch away from the point they last saw you, you're not getting any stamina back. So when you do reappear, you're practically dead. But despite all these caveats and all these negatives, the perk is still really good. And it's one of the best stalling perks in the entire game because the killer has to guess where you are, on top of using strategies to make guessing where you are harder. So this perk, I'd put, as I said, I might get flack for this, A tier. It's not S tier. I don't think it's a must-have perk. I think it's a little overrated, but it's not bad. It's a far from bad perk. And then the next perk we gotta talk about is Rewind. I feel like this one is pretty self-explanatory, but I'd put Rewind in S tier. And my reasons for it is that when this perk is used properly, right, you set up your teleport spot the most optimal position, and then you run away from it in the next 6 seconds before teleporting back. Like, not only is this perk such a chase breaker, like nearly uncounterable as a killer, because you don't know where the survivor is placing their teleport, and unless you're avidly paying attention to the HUD and seeing that the survivor has Rewind, there's still nothing you can do about it, because again, you don't know where their teleport spot is yet. So unless you have like a mobility tool to go right back to the position that you see them teleport to, there's almost nothing you can do to catch up with them. Because let me tell you, when I was trying to chase this one dude as PCX, I couldn't catch him until I had to save my first ability to go invisible and then teleport onto him. Point is that you need to purposely save your killer abilities to counter this perk, which is pretty insane. So I'd say this perk goes in easy S tier. It's hard to counter. The penalty for the survivor losing stamina while using this perk is like very negligible because you're so far away that you'll just regenerate it all back up. And because of how much distance you can cover with this perk and how much you can save your ass with this perk out of dead ends and traps and just basically dead zones where you would otherwise die, this perk goes in easy S tier. And the next perk we're talking about is Clarity. This perk goes in B tier for me. Now, the effect of the perk is that when you are at full stamina, the user will be able to see much further ahead of themselves than usual. So basically think of when you're playing Killer, how the map is so bright and you can see like practically across the map. Well, this perk basically grants you that same benefit. Now, the caveat to this perk is that obviously you have to be full stamina, which you can't do all the time, especially if you want to be effective with completing your objectives. And secondly, it's a little map dependent, because if you're on a very enclosed map, like the Joy of Creation, then you don't get much value of being able to see super far across the map because there's a lot of walls and stuff in the way. However, on more open maps like Pine View, I think that's the name of it, and that Teletubbies map, I forgot the name of it. Those maps are really good for that ability because you can see super far, making it so that getting ambushed or jumped by a killer is practically near impossible. So like let's say you're like last man standing or you're corner camping because you know the killer's nearby and you just want to be wary of where they're going to come from. This perk basically guarantees that you will not get jumped by them, because in certain situations where you're corner camping or you're just looking around trying to keep an eye out for the killer, you won't see them until they're basically right next to you because of the near sight that the game gives you as a survivor, especially against certain killers like Jeff. But with this perk, you will never get ambushed, ever, because you can see so far and you can get intel from across the map about what your teammate's doing, who the killer's chasing, where the killer is, being led to, so you can avoid them. The perk gives you decent info. It's just the caveats prevent it from being something like A tier. And even if the perk didn't have those caveats, it would stay A tier because information is nice and great, but it's not S tier worthy of something like Rewind. But I digress. Perk goes in B. The next perk is Parry Stance. Parry Stance is an active survivor upgrade that makes it so that upon pressing the button, a distinct sound cue will play and you'll be locked in place on top of holding your arm out in a parry stance. And if the monster attacks you, you gain 10 stamina back, the monster is knocked back, and a few seconds afterward, you will gain invulnerability, or in other words, invincibility. So even if the monster does catch up to you, they still can't hit you for like another second or two after you land a successful parry. However, if you fail to time it, or if the monster doesn't attack and they wait it out, you'll take extra damage as punishment for missing the parry stance. Now, unique interactions with this perk is that you can parry Fuwadi's Silly Rush, PCX's Jump, and MX's Charging Demise with this perk. So, PCX, powerful monster, MX, popular, powerful monster, and Fuwadi, good monster, not super popular. But point is, these are good monsters with very strong abilities that you can counter with this perk. And if not against these monsters in particular, against any other monster that you can react to with this perk. So this perk was given like an initial kind of view by the community from what I've seen, and I understand some of it because it's just like, oh, you push the monster back with a successful parry, but it's not that far, they still catch up to you. Yes, however, you have iframes after you successfully parry, so even if they do catch up to you, you still have time to run away and make distance because they can't damage you after you land a successful parry. And let me tell you, this perk is a nightmare for Jeff players because when you're in maniacal haste and you need to land that hit before your fatigue, happens, this perk will screw you over immensely. That, and for other killers as well, who maybe will try to take advantage of the fact that you're stunned in place by lurking facade or something along those lines. But point is, this perk is really good. It just takes good timing, and the benefits are really nice. I'd put this perk easy A tier. Now, the next perk we're going to be talking about is a personal favorites of mine for reasons you would know if you watched my first video on the Pillar Chase update, but I digress. The perk we're talking about is Duplicate. Duplicate is an active ability upgrade that makes it so that you spawn a clone of yourself that'll run in a straight line in the direction that you are facing for 8 seconds. And so the perk has like the niche of potentially confusing killers, especially when you combine it with something like Cloak, or when you just use it behind a wall or behind a corner. But the main, or at least the main use that I have it for, is that you can use this duplicate or the duplicate ability to bait killers into wasting their utility. So, for example, you can send a duplicate at an Inkfell portal. They'll think someone is standing on his portal, and he'll either do the Inkfell slam or the TP, which will result in his portal being destroyed, which is great because there's no other way of breaking his portal besides having someone sacrifice for health. Really stupid, but I digress. You don't have time to destroy an EXE trap. Guess what? Just send your clone into it and he'll tank the trap for you. You don't want the lurking facade to rat you out anymore by Forest King? Boom, use your duplicate to eat the lurking facade for you. This same thing applies with Nilo's radiation pools. You can send a clone directly on the radiation pool to bait the Nilo into thinking that someone stepped into his radiation. So not only does this perk have the unique gimmick of potentially confusing the killer and having them run off in a completely opposite direction of you, but you can use it as a way of disarming traps or fooling the killer into thinking that they got somebody when in reality they didn't. And this also applies with Stricken's custards too. So if a Stricken's feeling really, protective of the custard, you just send your clone one way while you go the other, and then it'll, they won't know what to go for. Or at the very least, they'll go for the person they think is infected, and then boom, it's a clone. So yeah, this upgrade is really good, and in my opinion really slept on. All they need to do with this perk is just fix it so that there's not like a random chance where the clone will flop over and just waddle on the floor like a moron and then disappear. They need to fix that. But assuming the perk works 100% of the time, which it's supposed to, this perk is phenomenal. Easy A tier. Oh, and let me quickly mention to you the other killers that you can use to screw with Duplicate. You can block Springtrap's Axe Throw with Duplicate. You can block PCX's dash with Duplicate, and it'll play the entire animation, which will buy you so much time. You can block Nilo's Godly Leap with the Duplicate. You can block Wist's Gobble Bombs with the Duplicate. You can block what's his name, Fuwadi's Silly Dash with the Duplicate. Like, there's so much multi-use for this ability, and although it is tricky to use properly and a bit luck dependent because of how buggy it is right now, it's so good. All right, we're at a home stretch, folks. The next thing we're talking about is the upgrade Invincible. So what the perk does is that when you first take damage, it will be ignored completely, and the ability goes on cooldown for 90 seconds, and after the damage is nullified, you will have 10 of your stamina drained and get highlighted to the monster according to the wiki, although I never really see that, but I digress. So yeah, the perk Invincible makes it so that you nullify the first instance of damage you take, on top of completely negating minor instances of damage. So like Nilo's radiation damage gets ignored with Invincible. Stricken's infection damage gets ignored with Invincible. Same with Vapor Spiders. They don't do damage to you while you have Invincible active. So someone like MX, for example, Invincible does great against because he has so much end lag in his attack that you can make a lot of distance from the initial hit that got completely negated by Invincible. You can use Invincible to bait Inkfell into wasting his portals on you, just for them to not do any damage. And then any like instances of massive bursts of damage, like Springtrap's Axe Throw, won't do anything to you. Getting ambushed by Jeff the Killer while crouched, which would normally do 70 damage, will get negated by this perk, on top of letting you have a head start because, he hit you. Point is, this perk is really good, and the one caveat with the stamina being drained in turn of you negating one hit is it's such a negative. Like, it's very minor. Like, it won't make or break or kill you majority of the time. The only biggest thing about this perk that sucks is the cooldown. Like, this is the single-handedly longest cooldown upgrade in the entire game at 90 seconds. Like, that is so long, but it makes sense because the effect is very powerful. So yeah, I put the perk in A. It's very good for baiting out abilities from killers, and against the heavy hitters, it basically removes the threat of potentially getting two-tapped, like with Jeff, or getting ambushed and stuff like that. And if you get cornered, no fret. You can just take the hit and then start running. So yeah, the perk goes in easy A. It's versatile and fucks over with the minions and passive damage over time. So remember how I said that there was this one support perk that I thought was really good? Well, it's about time we started talking about that perk. And that perk is Explode. Yeah, I'm talking about Explode, and I genuinely think it's quite good. So what Explode does is that when used, the user begins flashing white and beeping faster and faster like a ticking bomb until eventually exploding, killing the user instantly, and so on and so forth, you know? So what does this do? If the monster is nearby to be caught in the blast of you basically killing yourself, they will be blinded for about 3 seconds, same way they would with, with the flashbang. But the biggest thing about it is that their stamina will be drained to 0 and locked to 0 for a good amount of time, like 5, 6, I think 8 seconds, but I'm not too sure. But for like a decent amount of time, enough time to where your teammates could get like across the map or halfway across the map, and the killer's still like trying to regain their stamina. So yeah, the effect of this perk is very strong. The caveat is that you kill yourself in order for that, for that to happen. And then obviously, people have brought the point of, well, this game is about surviving. Why would you want a perk that essentially kills yourself at no benefit to yourself? It's about surviving. Why would you want this? It doesn't help you. That is true. However, it helps your teammates extraordinarily, like so much. And helping your teammates is just as important as helping yourself in this game, at least to me, right? And then, although yes, the perk does kill you, that's if you use it to kill yourself on purpose. The way to use this perk optimally, and for me, the smartest way to use it, is if you're cornered and you are about to kill you and there's no way out, just use the perk. Just start letting yourself tick up like a bomb, and then just run at the killer. Worst case scenario, they kill you and you still blow up on them and they still suffer the blindness and the 0 stamina, or they run away, which will be hard for them to do because you're faster than the majority of the killers in the game, and you still explode on them and they lose out on XP. So trust me, even if this perk involves you letting yourself die, it's still very strong, because again, in situations where you're gonna die regardless, this perk provides your teammates a huge head start and wastes a lot of the killer's time, while everyone else can focus on doing objectives and surviving and stuff. So this perk goes in surprisingly enough, I'd put this perk in A tier. I know this sounds crazy, but I'd put this perk in A tier. Never mind, I'm gonna put it in B. It's not as good as the upgrades that are in A tier. I'll put it in B. And we're at the final upgrade. Oh man, I never thought I would get here because it's taking me so long to get through this. Way longer than I initially thought. But anyways, enough yapping. The last upgrade we have is a super slider. So as you can imagine, the perk makes it so that you slide you slide a considerable amount of distance more at the cost of having it drain more stamina. So when you slide without this perk, you go the usual distance and drain 30. And then when you slide with this perk, you drain 54 stamina, but you slide like almost double the distance, maybe more. I'm not sure. I haven't really tested it, but I digress. How does the perk rank? This one's kind of tricky because I want to test this perk more in order to have a grasp on its strength, but I'm just going to place it based on how I feel about the perk and how my time with playing with the perk has been. And I'll put the perk in A. If the tier list was more sophisticated, I'll put it in low A, high B. And I'm just saying this now without experimenting with the perk more, mainly because I kind of can't, because I don't have a bunch of people to test with. But I digress. I'll put the perk in A for now because I don't see it as niche or as gimmicky as the perks in B. I can see it having a pretty prominent effect that's really strong, like the ones in A. However, without having a firm grasp on how much of a difference it makes with the slide, I can't see how much, like how good the perk is, and if the extra stamina usage is compensated for the distance that you make with it. So yeah, just for now, I'm putting it in A, because I do see it as a similar strength level as the other perks in A, and not as weak or as gimmicky or as niche as the perks in B. Not to mention, it has really good synergy with other perks, but I don't want to bring that up because I would be opening up a can of worms that is for a whole different video. But yeah, this perk goes in A. Well, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between, that's the end of the tier list. Here's the tier list on screen now. You can take a screenshot of it, show it to your friends, and talk about how trash my ranking was. I can understand. If you want to argue against any one of my points, feel free to do that and go ahead and do it. Just keep it civil. That's all I ask. And so yeah, thank you for sticking with me for 30 whole minutes. This took a lot longer than I thought this would take initially, but obviously I want it to be thorough and explain my reasoning as concise and detailed as I could. So yeah, that's the end of the video. I wish you a good rest of your morning, evening, midday, or night. It is 1:44 a.m. for me. I'm gonna go to bed because I finished the video. I can now sleep. Yippee.